Today we're going to learn about Adderall. Adderall is a very widely prescribed medication that's also used recreationally. So we're going to talk about what it is, how it works, and get into some details regarding this widely used substance. So in order to understand Adderall, we have to learn a tiny bit about ADHD. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. In the word, it explains what it is. Attention deficit. Those with ADHD have a hard time paying attention, have a hard time focusing on things. Hyperactivity. Those with ADHD find themselves having this inner motor to move and to do. And this is physical, but it's also in your thought patterns. Your mind is always bouncing everywhere, which leads to impulsivity. Impulsivity can be physically impulsive actions or mentally impulsive. All of it comes together. It's all a spectrum of different things, but these are some of the characteristic presentations of a child or adult with ADHD. So what is Adderall? Adderall is an amphetamine stimulant that's used to regulate attention and focus. So what is an amphetamine? You might be thinking methamphetamine. Well, you are correct. Methamphetamine and Adderall are very closely related. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So it's an amphetamine stimulant. Think of caffeine. Caffeine is a stimulant. Adderall is similar to caffeine, except it's like 5 times stronger. Stimulants increase wakefulness, mood, alertness, things like that. And it regulates attention and focus. Regulate as in it helps control, it helps manage attention and focus because you're lacking these things like we said before. So how does Adderall work? Well, Adderall helps certain neurotransmitters release into the body. Well, what is a neurotransmitter? Neurotransmitters are molecules in the brain that transmit information. Neuros, brain, transmit means you're exchanging information. The main ones I want to talk about are norepinephrine and dopamine. Norepinephrine is a molecule that's released during the fight or flight response. When you feel you're in danger, you feel a rush of energy and adrenaline, you feel a hyper focus. Well, that's norepinephrine doing its job. Most importantly, norepinephrine regulates focus. And this is what we want to normalize, quote unquote, in those with ADHD. So dopamine. Dopamine is a molecule most of us have heard about. It is known as the pleasure molecule. It's released as a part of the reward system. So let's say you really like shopping, you go shopping, you feel good, that's dopamine. Sex helps us feel good, that's dopamine. Listen to good music, that feeling we get is because of dopamine and a bunch of other stuff, but dopamine is a very important regulator of those things. It also regulates motivation. So those with ADHD have a difficult time being motivated, but also the reward system is not functioning well. So you're in a constant search for stimulation. You're doing this thing, then this thing, then this thing. You're bouncing back and forth because your system's not satisfied. And Adderall works to regulate these things. So let's get into the chemistry a little bit. We're not going to get too deep. What does the word amphetamine come from? Well, amphetamine stands for alpha-methylphenethylamine. Don't worry about that long name. We're going to pull some things from it. Amphetamine. Amphetamine. It just comes from the first few letters of each word. Adderall is a mixed amphetamine, which means the combination of a couple different amphetamines, D-amphetamine and L-amphetamine. For every 3 D-amphetamine, you got 1 L-amphetamine. All right, that's it for the chemistry. So what is an amphetamine? Like I said before, amphetamine is a stimulant. Think about caffeine. Now, this stimulant increases wakefulness, alertness, concentration, mood, and other things. I mentioned before that methamphetamine is very closely related to Adderall. Well, let's see. If we take D-amphetamine, this section of D-amphetamine and this section of methamphetamine is the same. We have this ring, this structure, this structure. What's different is this and this. That's the only difference in methamphetamine and Adderall. So let's get into some comparison and contrast between recreational use and abuse and prescribed use. So in both parties, there's an enhanced focus, but with those with ADHD, it's a regulated focus. If you do not have ADHD, you find that you are hyper-focused. You can be staring at something for 3 hours and all of a sudden you're like, wow, 3 hours just passed by. In the same vein, both increase alertness. In those who do not have ADHD, it's not just a regular alertness. You are intensely alert and you're overstimulated. It also increases wakefulness. If you have ADHD, it is a more regulated wakefulness. If you do not have ADHD, you could be up for hours and hours and hours because you can't sit still and you need to do something because you have so much energy. Now, this can also apply to those who have ADHD. It's a mixed bag, but I just want to give some general overview stuff. If you do not have ADHD, you may find that you are feeling great when you take this stuff, and then you feel terrible because the come down is rough. It can be similar for those who have ADHD, but from what I saw, recreational use has more extreme effects. And there's some research data that shows that recreational use decreases reaction time and response time in those who do not have ADHD, and there's a more balanced effect in those who have ADHD. So let's get into the dangers of abuse. In the short term, you might find yourself feeling very irritable. You might snap at people. You might feel a little testy, heart palpitations. Abuse of stimulants can cause some very serious cardiac issues. You may feel restlessness. Like I said earlier, you come home and you're like, I need to do something. Let me clean, let me go run, because you have all this energy. Long-term use and abuse can lead to depression and anxiety. I have here, what goes up must come down. You might be feeling great, but then you feel terrible because your body's pumping out all those molecules, making you feel good, making you feel elevated. Your body has to recover, so you're gonna swing all the way to the other side of the pendulum. And you get cravings. It's a very addictive substance, so you're gonna wanna crave it. You're gonna feel like you need it. You need that stimulation. And then fatigue. Like I mentioned before, you may feel great, energized, but your body is gonna fall into a state of fatigue because it's dumping out all those chemicals to make you feel the way you feel and has to regulate and recover. And here I have Hitler here because Hitler most of the time was tweaking out on methamphetamine, cocaine, and a bunch of other stimulants, which is why he acted so crazy. Outside of being crazy, he was hopped up on all these drugs. There's a video of him at the Olympics. I'll post it in the description, and he's rocking back and forth, moving his fingers, just tweaking out because he's probably going through withdrawal. I mean, this man was crazy. So let's talk about that a little bit. I'm not a historian, but I do know in Nazi Germany, the German chemists isolated methamphetamine and called it Pervitin. Now, Pervitin was very widely used, almost like caffeine. It was touted as a miracle drug. You could take this, and as a German citizen, you could work for your country for 24, 48 hours without sleeping, without stopping. It's also where this idea of blitzkrieg warfare came in. If you're a soldier and you take methamphetamine, you're going to overwhelm your opponent because you're not going to sleep. You're just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing because you got all that energy. It was also understood to help them attain human perfection. You know, the Germans in Nazi Germany had this idea, this Aryan race of this perfect human being. And this is one of the drugs they felt like contributed towards that perfection. And the propaganda machine pumped out this idea that only the strong Germans took Pervitin. This phrase, Germany awake, was pumped out to inspire everyone to focus, to work hard, and to serve your country with all of your energy. And all of this was because methamphetamine. In my opinion, Nazi Germany would not have been the same without this substance. Again, I'm not a historian, but that's just what I understand. So let's get to the summary. We talked about ADHD, how it's characteristic of inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity. And then we spoke about what Adderall was. It's an amphetamine stimulant used to regulate the flow of these neurotransmitters, norepinephrine, dopamine, to help regulate focus, motivation, and the reward system. Then we spoke about how amphetamine gets its name, and we spoke about what Adderall is made of, D-amphetamine, L-amphetamine. And amphetamines increase alertness, wakefulness, concentration, mood, and Adderall tends to be a very close relative of methamphetamine because they're from the same family. Then we got into the recreational use and abuse versus prescribed use, how there's a drastic difference between alertness, focus, wakefulness between both parties, and it's very evident after the drug is consumed. Then we spoke about the danger of abuse, irritability, heart palpitations, depression, anxiety, cravings, and fatigue. Then we closed out with Nazi Germany and Pervitin, aka methamphetamine. This drug powered this group of people to delude them into thinking they're perfect human beings. These soldiers could work for hours and hours and hours on the front lines because they were tweaking on meth and they were not going to sleep. And this drug really powered Nazi Germany to overwhelm their enemies and to work like crazy. So that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Tell your friends, and I'll be back soon with another video.